Replay PCs.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Replay PCs channel, and welcome to the new retro room. As you can see, I've been busy moving house and setting up this new room, but that's still a pretty pitiful excuse for the fact that it's been more than 12 months since my last video, so I do apologise for that, and no promises, but hopefully now I might start getting back to the list of topics that I've got for videos. Speaking of videos, before I go any further, I just want to give a big shout out to my good friend Mark for the intro piece that you just saw. I love it, hope you do too, and if so, please give Mark a shout out in the comments below as well. Now, some of you might be wondering, Stu, what's going on? Replay PCs, and I can see a Mac, and I can see an Amiga 500. Have you gone over to the dark side? No, don't worry, I haven't. Behind me, you will see here, we've got the Tandy 1000 TX, and down there underneath the bench, I've got my two full height towers. You'll probably know that I've got a soft spot for the full height towers. One of those is a 586, and the other one is a Pentium 200 MMX. Which brings us to today's topic, which is this motherboard and other ones like it. This is the BioStar MB8500 TVXA. And I just want to also give credit where credit is due and point out that this information does not come from me. I didn't discover it other than by reading this webpage that I've linked below in the comments. So if you're the sort of person who prefers to read information rather than watching a lengthy YouTube video, go and read that. If you didn't understand it though, or you'd like to have things explained and see someone actually doing it, then please continue to watch. However, if you do want to skip all of the preamble and skip straight to the doing, hit up this time point here. I'll also link that in the description, and you can skip all of this rubbish at the beginning. So what's the problem? So this board comes from a time, and there are other boards very, very similar to this that have the same problem, a time when MMX CPUs were out, and so the board supports dual plane voltages, but perhaps the 200 and 233 weren't out yet, and so it doesn't actually support those. And board manufacturers didn't kind of foresee the change that was really quite important for getting those CPUs to work. So if you go back to early Pentiums, not the first, but early Pentiums being the Socket 5, that's when we got the Pentium 75, the 90 and the 100. All of those correspond to a fixed multiplier of 1.5 with a bus speed of either 50, 60 or 66 megahertz. So to actually achieve the multiplier, the CPUs have got two pins referred to as BF0 and BF1. And each of those can be in one of two states, either a 0 or a 1, a low or a high. You can think of that as either being grounded or having a voltage applied. So internally, there is a default, and the default is for both of those pins to be set high, which corresponds to a 1.5 multiplier. The other settings being 0, 1, which is a 2 times multiplier, 0, 0, which is 2.5, or 1, 0, which is 3 times multiplier. So you're going, aha, well, the board supports the 3 times multiplier, and it works with a Pentium 200 CPU, why not the 200 MMX? So what happened is that when Intel brought out the 200 and the 233, they needed a new multiplier by being 3.5 times to get the 233 megahertz. So they wanted to reuse that 1.5 times multiplier and have the CPU interpret it as 3.5. But then they didn't want that to be the default. So what they did is they changed those two CPUs, the 200 and the 233, so that internally the default was now the 0, 1, so BF0 set to 0 or low, and BF1 set to 1. Well, board manufacturers up until this point hadn't seen any need for a jumper setting to actually set one of those pins high to have a voltage. They only needed to pull it low. By default, they were both high, so you only needed two jumpers that could actually pull those pins low. So now you might be able to see the issue. BF0 is low by default, and to get the 200 or the 233, so the 3 times multiplier or the 1.5, which is interpreted as 3.5, you need to set BF0 high. Aha! So it's not you, try as you might. You pop in the 200 megahertz CPU, you set the multiplier pins correctly, jumpers correctly, and you fire it up, and this is all you get. Like I said, it's not you, it's not the CPU, it is the motherboard. The fix for this problem is actually quite straightforward. All we need to do is set the BF0 pin high, and we do that by applying a voltage to it. We use VCC3, also known as VIO. Obviously we want to limit the amount of current that is drawn by the CPU, so we want to use a resistor along that. So today we're going to be using a multimeter, a 1K resistor, a short length of wire with DuPont connectors, some heat shrink, a pin, and of course your soldering iron and your solder. And it should be fairly obvious what you need to do in order to make this. The actual length of wire that you use will depend upon the spacing of the pins that you find on your particular motherboard, or you can just make up a few of different lengths like I did, because I have used some of these on different motherboards in the past before. It doesn't really matter if the wire is a little bit too long, because you can always tuck it somewhere out of the way. So now we need to establish where this actually connects on the motherboard in order to get that voltage to the BF0 pin. So firstly, we're going to establish which header pin on the motherboard goes to the BF0 pin. Now the header pin is going to be one of those that is used for setting the multiplier. So consult your motherboard manual and establish which ones those are. And then we just need to work out which pin is BF0 in the socket. So if you Google socket 7 pin out, you'll get some different images, and from that you'll be able to find BF0. Or one way to remember it is if you orient the socket with pin 1 to the top left, then look in the bottom right corner and you'll see this, which is the key pin. From there, go across and up and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is BF0. Open up the socket and put the pin in, close it up again, and now we can check for continuity between there and those header pins. On this motherboard, it's these four here. So again, we just tap one probe and feel around until we find, there it is. That's the one that we want. So that's the pin that connects to BF0. So one end of the header shunt, of the 1K resistor shunt, is going to go on there. Remove your pin. All we need to do now is find where the other end connects, find a suitable source of VCC3 or VIO, that's the 3.45 or 3.5 volts. Now, if you recall, a single plane voltage CPU has VIO equals Vcore, so they're both running at that. And a good place to look is going to be any jumper setting that is changed for switching between single plane and dual plane voltages. All of the ones on this board that have got the red jumpers are related to CPU voltage. So simply set your multimeter to the voltage setting and power up the board. And then we can probe around here. On this particular board, these ones here are on for single plane voltage and off for dual plane voltage. So when we actually just probe there, I can see 2.9, what about this one? There I've got a 3.54 volts, and there I've got a 3.54 volts. So basically either of these two pins is going to work quite well. Turn that off. So the other end of that is simply going to connect to one of those pins. Now let's give it a try. And voila, we have 200 megahertz. So there you go, really simple fix. All it requires is a couple of parts and very basic soldering skills and a little bit of time. No modifications to the CPU or the motherboard are required. And as I mentioned at the beginning, yes, there are other boards that have these problems. So if you encounter one where you just can't seem to get more than 166, or you see an eBay listing and it says Pentium 200 MMX running at 166, it's probably a dead giveaway that you can apply this fix. All right, till next time, take care.